Hello, everybody. This is Fernando for the latest Silent Hill podcast. Alright, another entry here based on a monster next encounter within the Silent Hill 4 The Room game. Also found first within the prison world, but later on encountered throughout the forest world, and then lastly throughout the apartment world as well. This one is a major monster of sorts in the sense that it was heavily featured in much of the advertising of the game. I remember when this game was first coming out and all the teasers were being associated with it, this creature was featured heavily on it. So I was real excited to see it finally in the game. And then afterward, it was interesting to see that it was really more of a kind of like a tepid moment. There wasn't really much to the monster thereafter, but still notable to talk about. And I'm talking about this very distinctive look. It's called a twin victim, also known as the Doublehead, and here's all the information associated with it. So what is this twin victim? Well, it seems to be a ghost of some sort. I want to say it's a ghost, but it's not an official ghost, not like the other ones that are encountered within the parts of the game, the ones that are floating around, that creating their aura. The closest thing I can mention it to a ghost is because it comes from a deceased victim of Walter Sullivan, or deceased victims, much like the other ghosts themselves. But for whatever reason, these poor, I guess, individuals were then turned into a monster rather than a ghost outright. But it is very, very close to being to a ghost itself. It has a very distinctive look, immediately unlike anything else regarding any of the other monsters. For starters, it is one of the larger set of monsters. It has these very, very long arms, a long, gigantic, almost enormous, giant-sized adult arms used as legs as well. It seems to have a smock or some kind of dirty piece of rag or clothing tied to it as well, and then with a little hoodie on top, and then you can even make out what looks to be a scarf wrapped around its neck. But by far the most distinctive, most eerie, the most creepiest thing regarding these twin victims happens to be its namesake. The idea of two baby faces making up the monster's quote unquote face itself. Very creepy, especially with the look that it has, almost as if these babies are just sleeping, forever sleeping, but they happen to have that expression outright to essentially at all times. They don't do pretty much anything else with regards to their faces. So that's what makes it really, really creepy. Those of you that are scared, for example, from dolls or just eerie looking dolls themselves, this is the stuff of nightmares when it comes to this victim. And when it was first encountered within the water world, the prison world, it made a very distinct impression because you came out of a cell. In terms of Henry, it seems like that's another thing that I would criticize about the game when it came to the prison world, because when I was watching the main player, that's what he was doing for a long ad nauseum time period, just going in and out of cells, in and out, floor after floor. But during one very distinct instance, he came out, and then there was this thing standing just a few feet away, and it has an absolutely particular movement before it attacks you. It has this look that it gives you, again, these faces being these infants looking like they're forever sleeping, staring right at you, and it's pointing one of its very large hands with the finger straight towards you, almost as if it's knowing obviously that you're there, and it knows that you were coming out of that cell and it was waiting for you this entire time. So it's almost like a shock moment of sorts. It wasn't necessarily like 100% scared when it came out, but it was just a double take of sorts when I saw this thing first in the corner, peering directly at the player, pointing at them. Interestingly though, that's all it does if you keep your distance to this twin victim. It doesn't do anything else. It just simply notes that you're there, and it just simply stays there as long as you don't move any closer to it, or you don't do anything to outright provoke it, such as shooting at it with a gun or using one of those long melee weapons of some sort. So it makes it also very unique, because many of the other monsters within the Silent Hill 4 The Room game will just outright attack Henry at all time periods, no matter where he's at. But in this case, with this twin victim, as long as you keep your distance after it first notices you and is pointing towards you, then you're fine. But of course, the way the game is made, there are certain situations where you have to come across it in order to get to another side, let's say a door behind it or some kind of corner around it, and so that's when this thing will attack. And then in other circumstances, I saw the main player go into a cell, and then there it was right nearby, so it immediately just started attacking because of the proximity of Henry. And the way it attacks is pretty fierce. Those arms are not there just for decoration. It uses them with a very long attack. It can attack forwards, it can attack backwards as well. I saw the main player have to deal several times when it was behind these twin victims, and you'd think you'd be safe. This thing would have to turn around, but it doesn't have to. Instead, it'll do some kind of swinging blow from behind and deal the same kind of damage as if Henry was on top, or I'm sorry, in front of these twin victims. So the best way to do anything when it comes to attacking this creature is, of course, from a distance. Also because it can lunge very quickly at the main player. I was watching this several times too. The way it was lunging forward, it was eerie. I mean, the way it moves almost like a gorilla of some sort, using again those long arms as legs, and it can reach those distances very quickly. So that's why you have to always keep your distance. That's what I saw this main player doing while I was watching them play. And then when you use any weapons, you can try to use anything as far as the guns, but it's not really advised because of the short amount of ammo that you might have. Instead, just do the usual thing where you're waiting and then striking at the right moment. Do it enough times, and then the twin victims go down. And then just like any of the other monsters listed within the game, as soon as they go down, you have to do another attack, stomping on them in order to ensure that it's the final blow. By the way, they give off a very creepy, sobbing action of some sort when they're on the ground, stunned, about to be killed, because they go back to their young children phase because of their infant status, and it just makes it seem just again utterly creepy, the idea that you're stomping on a child of some sort, or in this case an infant, while you're trying to kill them, and it in turn is doing infant-like actions. Reminds me of the controversy of the first Silent Hill game, I believe, with those mumblers, those great children of some sort, because those two were censored here because of how they looked like children, and so you had to shoot them, and so that's where they were changed to a different look. And now it's interesting that with all that controversy in the first Silent Hill game, how here in the Silent Hill 4 The Room game, here you have outright children, in this case infants, faces on an actual monster, and there was no need for censorship. Maybe it was the passage of time when it came to video games, and that's why there was no need to do any changes whatsoever. As far as who they're supposed to symbolize, the closest, of course, is that they symbolize the victims themselves, in this case the 7th and 8th victims from Walter Sullivan's massacre. They were the names Billy and Miriam Locane, who were twins, mentioned actually in Silent Hill 2. That's another little bit of trivia regarding Silent Hill 4. Many of the situations there originated within Silent Hill 2, which I kind of love when they do that. It's like the Marvel movies nowadays, how you have certain films reference another prequel or another movie shortly afterward or before it, as a little nod to certain situations. So that's what happened in this case. These were some of Walter's earliest victims, of course him being the savage person that he was, killing these infants, and then they in turn became a monster of some sort known as the twin victims. There's multiple iterations of them too, so it's not like you just kill one twin victim and that's it, like some of the ghosts that you encounter, some of the main ones at least. No, in this case you'll find multiple twin victims all at the same time too, all of them being reincarnations in monster form of Billy and Miriam Locane. They're also supposed to symbolize the attachment that Walter had with his mother. Yet again, so much of the game itself harkens to that particular notion. In this case, having to do with the attachment that twins generally have with each other. There's the idea that sometimes twins do have some kind of communication, a silent communication between them. How like one twin can feel another twin being hurt, or one twin can understand like if they're going through sorrow, happiness, something along those lines. There's that form of spiritual, or that form of very symbolic attachment between the two. Such was the case here with Walter and his mother, hence why he made them a monster rather than say something along the lines of a ghost. Maybe because that way they could be a recurring monster rather than just a one-off ghost, showing more of an attachment with regards to Walter and his mother. But that's it. That's pretty much most of the information tied to these victims, these twin victims encountered throughout multiple parts of the game. Here's some concept art, by the way, that showcases the early stance, how it looked while the game was being developed. For the most part, it seems like they kept most of it outright. Maybe a little bit of detail was changed with regards to the attire that these twin victims had, but for the most part they kept it there. And then also there was just a slight little change associated with the way this thing screamed. I remember in the early trailers it did have a more infant-like, kind of like childlike scream of some sort, but now whenever it's part of the game you'll notice that it has more of a grunt, like a monster-like grunt, like some of the other monsters encountered within the game. One last thing too notable about the twin victims: they are one of the few monsters encountered throughout the entire series, all of the games, where these creatures can talk. So they are cognizant, in other words, enough to be able to talk and mutter words, as opposed to a lot of the other monsters that just make undecipherable sounds and grunts. In fact, whenever they're pointing straight at Henry, they're supposed to be muttering something. I didn't really hear it. Maybe it has to be turned up really, really loud. But if you do so, you're supposed to hear them whisper "receiver of" as they're pointing to Henry, indicating that he is tied to Walter, in some case being the receiver of ... something else that you and I have to make up the end result of. But yes, that shows that they are at least cognizant and conscious enough to be able to speak even when they're in their monstrous form. One of the few monsters to do this within the entirety of the Silent Hill series. But that's it. That's all the information. If anyone has any more opinions regarding this very creepy, very distinct looking creature encounter within the game, please post those comments below. That'd be really, really good to hear. So, alright everybody, thanks again as always. Take care.